Hello and welcome to Medicinal Mushrooms for Women's Health, presented by Midsouth Women's Herbal. I am Michelle Rigling, and mushrooms are my favorite thing to talk about. So thanks for joining me. This class has been created with beginners in mind, but we hope that even those who know a bit about mushrooms will still walk away with some new information. We offer lots of classes that are a deeper dive into some of the topics I'm going to touch on today. We invite you to check out our other events and offerings if you would like to learn more. So I'd like to just give a brief introduction to who Mid-South Women's Herbal is and kind of what we do. So Mid-South Women's Herbal was founded in 2017. And we started out as a women's herbal conference, and we've grown to a year-round community and collective. Our vision is the thread that runs through everything that we do. And so I love to read it when I'm teaching as a way to kind of share our why. So in our vision for women in the earth, women are empowered as stewards of the earth and guardians of natural healing traditions. We are rooted in connection and united by a shared vision of nature-centered wholeness and healthy self-reliance. In our vision, herbal medicine is accessible to all, and traditional practices are both safeguarded and celebrated as everyone's birthright. Nature lovers, herbalists, and students have welcoming and friendly places to learn and grow. Elders are honored and respected as wisdom keepers, and everyone has access to a diverse network of safe teachers, compassionate practitioners, and dependable community resources. So we want healing and accessibility and safety for all people. And we recognize that in many spaces, including the herbal medicine and medicinal mushroom fields, many women with expertise and wisdom simply haven't had the resources or the platform or the encouragement to share and teach. So we are committed to offering opportunities and that encouragement to ensure women are able to honor their gifts, wisdom, and roles as healers and wisdom keepers, especially within our communities where their gifts are so needed. So I'd like to also introduce myself and a couple of my friends. So my name is Michelle Rigling. I am in private practice in Chattanooga, Tennessee as an ecotherapist and a transpersonal counselor. I also incorporate medicinal mushrooms into my work a significant part of the time. My background is in social work, but I feel like I left social work so long ago, and certainly is still an element of what I do, but it's also very different. So yeah, I'm an ecotherapist, a transpersonal counselor, and when we start talking about medicinal mushrooms, I am an IMMA trained mycotherapist, a board certified holistic health practitioner, and when we want to start talking about psychoactive mushrooms and plants, I'm a trauma-informed sacred medicine journey guide. I'm trained by Aya with a focus in psychedelic medicine, and I'm a therapeutic integration counselor as well as a trauma-informed journey sitter, or you may have heard the term trip sitter. And the friends that I would like to introduce you to today, I just have a few of my companions with me. I have this reishi, Ganoderma suga. So this reishi came from a hemlock tree. I have some chaga with me that was ethically harvested in Minnesota. And I have a little bitty Amanita muscaria mushroom. So these guys and gals are keeping me company today, and I really do regard mushrooms as my friends. So maybe a little insight into my quirky personality here too. A couple of announcements before we get started. If you are viewing this before August 25th, 2024, then I would love to invite you to the Chattanooga Medicinal Mushroom Summit. It's a day-long summit in Chattanooga at Crabtree Farms, and it's a full day of medicinal mushroom education. So we have lots of workshops and discussions around all things medicinal mushrooms. And then I would love to also share with you about our fall herbal conference. So the Mid-South Women's Herbal Conference happens every fall. This year, the dates are October 4th through the 6th. Our conference is in Nauvoo, Alabama, which is about an hour from Birmingham. So if you're in the region or you'd like to take a trip and travel here, we would love to see you in October. We also offer medicinal mushroom consultations. So if you, after watching this class, you have some questions or you would like to have some one-on-one support, we would love to support you in that way, and you can reach out to us via email. So let's start maybe with why I work with mushrooms. And I'll say that people have been working with mushrooms, both medicinally and spiritually, for thousands of years. They are ancient healers and powerful medicine, and they have played a very significant role in my own life as well. Mushrooms are, well, fungi as a kingdom is 1 billion years old, and then we have mycelial fossils that date back 810 million years. So these fungi and fungals are ancient. They've been around, they've seen a thing or two, they know a bit about change and adaptation and um, detoxification, and oh, it's just so much. They're just so wise. So another thing is that mushrooms are one of the most medicinal beings in nature. They have nutritive properties, they have therapeutic properties, and they're also a source of spiritual medicine as well. And finally, mushrooms are accessible. You can forage them, you can grow them, and you can source them pretty easily. So a few common medicinal mushrooms I'll be touching on in this class are shown on the screen. There are some others as well, but I thought since there's a good chance I may just throw some of their names around a little bit, I wanted you to at least have a visual of what some of them looked like, so that you might be able to make the connection in your mind if you've heard of reishi, but you're not sure what it looks like, or you've perhaps seen lion's mane, but you didn't know what that's what it was. So from left to right on the screen, we have turkey tail, we have tremella, we have lion's mane. Next up is cordyceps. Then we have reishi, and last is chaga. So this class is mushrooms for women's health, and we're definitely going to dive into some specific ways we can work with mushrooms directly related to women's health and women's health issues. But first of all, I want to just cover a few ways that mushrooms are good for everyone, because of course, women are part of everyone. And so anyone can get these amazing benefits from working with medicinal mushrooms. So first of all, medicinal mushrooms are packed with vitamins and minerals. Some of the ones I'd like to highlight: zinc, copper, iron, potassium, the B vitamins. Vitamin D is a big deal if mushrooms have grown outside or if they've been exposed to sunlight, then medicinal mushrooms are also a good source of vitamin D. They're an excellent source of protein. Mushroom protein contains all 9 amino acids, which is really important because we need amino acids for a lot of things. We need amino acids for energy, for building and repairing muscles, for maintaining healthy bones, and for making hormones and enzymes. Mushrooms have more protein than any plant. And as an example, oyster mushrooms are 30% protein. So that's pretty amazing. Medicinal mushrooms offer a lot of benefits for our digestive and our gut health. We see that they reduce gut inflammation. They're excellent sources of fiber, which we will be coming back to. They support the immune system, which may be one of the most famous medicinal properties of mushrooms. The beta glucans in mushrooms help modulate the immune system, helps stimulate an underperforming immune system, and there's also lots of other things that beta glucans do as well. This helps them play a role in cancer prevention as well as recovering from cancer, such as during the chemotherapy process. So these immune boosting properties are significant. We also see medicinal mushrooms as an ally for liver support. So they help with detoxification, they help repair tissue, they are antiviral, and they can help the liver handle the burden of medications. And so if there's a lot of medications that's putting pressure on the liver or overburdening the liver, medicinal mushrooms can help with that. And they also help reduce oxidative stress. And so I'm not actually going to come back to oxidative stress. And so I wanted to just throw in there that reishi, chaga, shiitake, and maitake are some of the mushrooms that are well known for reducing oxidative stress. And then finally, they're great for brain health and nervous system support. So there are a variety of compounds in medicinal mushrooms that are neuroprotective. They're adaptogenic, which means they help regulate the nervous system and calm the nervous system. They can help reduce anxiety and the experience of stress. So we'll get into some of this a little bit more when we talk about mental health, but I think that this alone, without going any further, is pretty amazing and a great reason to incorporate medicinal mushrooms, at least into your diet as food, but we can look at some other ways to bring them into our lives as well. So there's definitely some things that I wish I would have known before I attended the first few medicinal mushroom classes I ever took years ago. A lot of those classes I went into, and it was expected or assumed that people in the class knew what certain things were, and that was not true. And so I would find myself writing down, like, I need to look this word up, or what does this even mean? Or I can't tell you how many classes I sat through before I like really understood what a beta glucan was. And so I like to cover just some basic things before I teach any medicinal mushroom topic. So let's zip through just a few of these. So first of all, I just want to talk about a few terms. So when we hear the word mushroom, some of us may think of the fruiting body, and the fruiting body is what we see. So whether we're talking about a mushroom that's grown out of the ground, or we're talking about a mushroom that's maybe grown out of a decaying log, or maybe a shelf mushroom like reishi that's growing on the side of a tree or out from the tree bark, that is the fruiting body of the mushroom. That is a tiny, tiny, tiny part of the entire mushroom's being. So another part of a mushroom is the mycelium. And the mycelium is the white, web-like or thread-like or tentacle-like parts of the mushroom that extend out underneath the ground. And there are miles and miles of mycelium underneath our feet anywhere we walk. It's just incredible. But we don't see it and we don't think about it. And so when we talk about medicinal mushrooms, there's some compounds that are found in mycelium, and there's some compounds that are found in fruiting bodies, and there's some compounds that are found in both. And so it can come into play when we're talking about certain formulas or protocols. And so I just like people to know that there is a difference. And then also substrate can also come into the conversation. So substrate is what the mycelium is growing in and around and through. And so if we're talking about a wild mushroom, then we may not even use the word substrate. It's just growing on a log or it's growing in the ground. But when we're talking about cultivated mushrooms, then the substrate can be a variety of different things. It could still be on a log, could be on straw or wood chips, compost, sawdust, but we could also have a substrate of rice or oats, different things like that. So we'll get to a little bit more about that in just a little bit. And I'd like to share just some of the medicinal compounds that are found in mushrooms and what their roles are, just to kind of help understand why they're important. And so the first one is beta glucans. So beta glucans are the most immunologically active and widely studied of all mushroom compounds. They're antibacterial, they activate natural killer cells, they help with bone marrow protection. They also increase the production of new immune and red blood cells. So beta glucans are just very important for our immune system health, and they can make a very big difference both as a preventative medicine or a recovery medicine. We also have fatty acids in medicinal mushrooms, which contribute to their nutritional value as well as have some medicinal actions on their own. We have ergosterol, which is a provitamin form of vitamin D. And what that means is when our bodies bring in the steroid, then our bodies convert it into vitamin D. We have phenolic compounds. So these are antioxidants that reduce free radical damage and inhibit a variety of problems from hypertension to neurodegenerative disease. We have indolic compounds, and indoles are things like the amino acid tryptophan, neurotransmitter serotonin. There's lots of different examples that I could give here. And then we have terpenes. And terpenes are hydrocarbons. We can have terpenes, diterpenes, triterpenes. But these are compounds that give mushrooms many of their antiviral, anti-inflammatory, even anti-parasitic, and neuroprotective qualities. And some mushrooms have a ton of terpenes. And so we may not be able to, pull them all apart and say this terpene does that specific thing and this terpene does that specific thing. And that's the one we need. For example, reishi has over 300 terpenes. But this is a really important classification of medicinal compounds that give mushrooms a lot of their medicinal properties. So now that we've talked about the compounds, let's just briefly talk about the cell structure. And as we talk through this, you'll understand why it matters. So if we think about this, there's a cell membrane and there's a cell wall around that cell membrane. So the outside of the cell wall is made up of these manoproteins, and right underneath these manoproteins, we have the beta glucans. But there's something really interesting about these beta glucans, and that is the beta glucans are attached to or bonded to, you could say, the chitin. And the chitin is represented on this slide in yellow. And chitin is this very hard, tough, almost like exoskeleton that prevents us from being able to get anything else that's under it. So the chitin is protecting the cell membrane. And there's lots of really good stuff in the cell membrane. There's terpenes, there's phenolic compounds, there's indoles, but we can't access any of the things in the cell membrane if we don't break that chitin down. But we also cannot access the beta glucans if we don't break the chitin down because the chitin is hanging on to it. And we need to be able to extract those beta glucans out into water and then consume them. And we cannot do that if that chitin is not broken down. And so the way that we break down chitin is with heat. That's the only way to break down chitin in mushrooms. And so back to beta glucans are water soluble. And so we want to apply heat and water to mushrooms to make sure that, first of all, we break the chitin down. And then, second of all, we're able to extract the beta glucans from the cell wall so that it can be available to us. And then, like I said, that process is also important to ensure that we can access the other medicinal compounds like those terpenes and phenolic compounds and indoles. So there's a few different medicinal preparations that I'll talk about, and that's somewhat related to the slide that we just went through. And one is cooking with mushrooms. So medicinal mushrooms is a great example of how food can be our medicine. There are so many benefits we can get from medicinal mushrooms from just eating them, just working them into our diet. And so based on what I just shared, we want to make sure that however we prepare mushrooms, that we are exposing them to some sort of heat. Now, we don't necessarily want to expose them to extended periods of high heat. We don't want to fry them or boil them for a long period of time, but we do want to expose them to some heat. And so, this could be like making a broth or making a tea. It could be sauteing them. It could even be dehydrating them because the heat from the dehydration process, if you're using a dehydrator, is typically a high enough temperature to break down that chitin. And so I've already kind of jumped ahead here to the extract tea, or you could call it a decoction, but the traditional medicinal preparation of mushrooms would be an extract tea. And so an extract tea is taking the mushroom, and it could be a fresh mushroom, but oftentimes it would be a dry mushroom, and bringing that water to a simmer or a boil, and then simmering that mushroom, steeping, if you will, the mushroom in the water for a long period of time. So you could call this an extract tea, you could call this a decoction, you could call this a broth. And once you have done that, you could simply discard the mushroom itself. You could compost it. There's, a variety of things you could choose to do with the mushroom. And you could just drink the tea or make a soup with the broth. You could even freeze it to use later. I love to use extract tea and mushroom broth when I make rice. Instead of just using regular water, I like to use a broth or an extract tea. And sometimes I'll even throw some herbs in it too. And you have the medicinal properties from some of the herbs. But another thing that you can do with an extract tea is you can make an extract powder. And so you'll see extract powders in the store. Here's an example from real mushrooms. And an extract powder is when you take the tea that you've made from this long simmer and you take the mushroom, so the flesh of the mushroom that's been in the water, and you blend them both up in a blender. And then you pour that liquid, kind of muddy like liquid, into a dehydrator tray, and you dehydrate all of it. And when you do that, you get a powder. And so now you have this really potent powder that is a medicine that includes what you extracted into the water from the mushroom, and then it also has the mushroom itself in it. And so you can make extract powders on your own. You can buy them at the store. Sometimes you'll see extract powder just in a bag of, it's just loose powder, and you can add it to smoothies, or you can do whatever with it you want. And sometimes you'll find extract powder that's already been encapsulated into supplements. Now, one thing that I want to share is that if you go to the store or you go online and you order an extract powder, remember that it's already gone through the water extract process and the heat process. So it's good to go. So you can take that extract powder and you can put it in anything. You can put it in something cold. You can eat it. I mean, you could eat it right out of the bag if you wanted to. And so the extract powder is very, very versatile and it stores well. You can add it to anything. I find that each type of mushroom has kind of its own unique taste. And so, like for instance, lion's mane, I think adds really well to smoothies, and I even put it in my pie filling sometimes. And then I find that like reishi and chaga and turkey tail, they go well with chocolate. They go well with oatmeal, some more like of your savory things. And so you can play around with it and have fun experimenting, but it's a very versatile way to bring medicinal mushrooms into your life. And then the last preparation that I want to talk about today before moving on is the double extract tincture, or some people say the dual extract. And so there are some compounds in medicinal mushrooms that are soluble, they're water soluble. And then there's some that are alcohol soluble. So if you make an extract tea only, and you could use it then or turn it into a powder, but either way, you're only going to be getting the compounds that are water soluble. And sometimes we need the compounds that are alcohol soluble. And so if that's the case, then a double extract tincture is the way to go, because what we have is a blend of a water extract and an alcohol extract combined together into one tincture or formula. So just a few words about mycelium versus the fruiting body. I just want to share some basic differences here. Fruiting body is a pure mushroom. So there's not going to be anything else in a powder or a tincture or a formula that is fruiting body, other than obviously in, water or alcohol. With mycelium, it can be a little bit different because mycelium is growing on some sort of substrate, especially with products that you get from the store. They're all being grown at, they're cultivated variety. They're not most likely going to have been wildcrafted, especially if the mycelium is involved. And so mycelium is growing on the substrate, and the substrate could be oats or it could be rice. And depending on how much mycelium to how much substrate there is in that biomass when the mushroom formula gets made, depends on how much mycelium and medicinal mushroom compounds you're getting versus how much substrate and perhaps starch you're getting. And so if the person who is making the medicine that you're getting, if they make the medicine a little too soon, then there could be a lot of starch or a lot of oats or a lot of rice in your product and not so much mushroom. And so we just want to be aware of the quality of whomever we're ordering these mycelium products from. It's not a bad thing that oats or rice or whatever is part of the biomass. It's just an important thing to know. And so, some people prefer only working with fruiting bodies, and some people swear by mycelium, and some people like to simply know what the mycelium has been, what substrate's been used, because if it's rice, maybe they personally don't eat rice, and so they don't want to take a chance. But maybe they're like, oh, rice, that's great. Like I'd like some of the properties of rice mixed in with. So there's lots of ways to look at this. If you want to hear some mushroom people argue, you can bring up the debate of mycelium versus fruiting bodies, and some people have really strong opinions about it. I'm not here to referee or even contribute to that conversation, but I do like people just to know that there is a difference in mycelium and fruiting body, and that not only when we talk about mycelium do we have to, just consider the biomass and the substrate that is involved in that, but we also have to know that depending on the reason we're working with a specific mushroom, we may be looking for the assistance of a compound that is in the fruiting body, or a compound that's only in the mycelium, or it might be a compound that it doesn't matter. It's in both. So a practitioner can really help you sort that out if that's the level at which you're working with medicinal mushrooms. So here we are, medicinal mushrooms and women's health. Let's dive in. So mushrooms for the yin. I love this. Traditional Chinese medicine talks about how mushrooms bring yin energy. And so if we think about yin and feminine qualities, we think about calming, we think about cooling, we think about balancing. And when we think about masculine energy and yang energy, we think about heat, and we think about activity, and we think about movement. And so in a lot of ways, we can understand how, based on that energetic property of mushrooms, that they can be very helpful in assisting in calming a situation, calming the nervous system, cooling the body, detoxifying the body, and bringing balance to whether it's our physical health, our emotional system, our mind, or even our spirit. So let's talk about fiber. Fiber plays many roles in the body, and we all need fiber. The average US intake of fiber is 15 grams a day. The recommended daily value is 25 grams for adult women. And so we're already coming in 10 grams under what our country's recommendation is. But I think it's also interesting to note from a medicinal standpoint that when we look at indigenous cultures and when we look at current societies that have really good gut health, we find that those people are consuming 40 to 60 grams of fiber a day. So that's like 4 times the average intake in our country. So why does this matter? Well, studies show that people who eat 50 grams of fiber daily reduce their risk of cardiovascular disease by 50% compared to those consuming 15 to 25 grams. Studies also show that higher than average fiber intake is correlated with lower cancer rates. And fiber is essential to our gut health, which makes it essential to our mental health, considering that our gut is where 80% of our serotonin and 50% of our dopamine is produced, not the brain. And there's this very direct link and interaction between our gut and our nervous system. And so if we have poor gut health, we're probably going to struggle with our nervous system. And if our nervous system is dysregulated and we have an overactive stress response, then our gut health is probably going to suffer, because they really work together in this kind of a loop. And so why are we talking about this in the women's health section? Well, guess what the top 3 women's health issues currently are in our country, according to the University of Cincinnati at least: cardiovascular disease, cancer, and mental health. So if for no other reason alone, increasing our fiber intake can have an impact on our health, directly related to the top 3 health issues that women are facing in 2024. So let's talk about mushrooms and fiber then. Mushrooms have twice the fiber of bananas, beets, collards, and broccoli. Oyster and shiitake mushrooms tend to be one of the highest fibrous mushrooms per serving. 3 grams or 3 shiitake equals 7 grams of fiber. So that's pretty amazing. Just 3 average size shiitake mushrooms, 7 grams of fiber. So maybe pick up some shiitakes the next time you're in the grocery store. Just don't forget to cook them. Don't forget to heat them before you eat them. We want those beta glucans. So based on all of this information, it's easy to see that increasing our fiber intake is said to be one of the most effective things we can do to reduce our risk of cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, inflammation-based illness, and to support our gut and mental health. Let's touch on these 3 health conditions by looking at the beta glucans. So when it comes to heart disease, the beta glucans in medicinal mushrooms reduce inflammation and they support healthy lipid levels. So in this way, they are able to support the cardiovascular system and reduce the risk of heart disease. When we're talking about cancer, the beta glucans in medicinal mushrooms have the immunomodulation effect, they're anti-tumorous, and they can really support the body during chemo. In Japan, mushroom farmers have a much lower risk of dying from cancer than the general population. And there was a study that came from China that showed reduced cancer risk in women who regularly consumed 10 grams of fresh mushrooms daily. When we look at mental health, we can look at how the beta glucans exhibit antidepressant effects. They reduce inflammation in the brain and the gut, which again impacts our serotonin and dopamine levels. And then there's terpenes and other compounds in medicinal mushrooms that also support our mental health. So we have different compounds that act as adaptogens and they interact with the HPA axis. This initiates the body's stress response and it influences our ability to return to a calm equilibrium after a stressful event or a trigger. And so, yeah, in this way, these terpenes and other compounds can support our nervous system and support us during times of stress and anxiety and fatigue. So what are some other women's health concerns? So vitamin D deficiency, I think, is high on a lot of people's list. Fatigue and low energy is a common complaint. The female reproductive system is something unique to women. So whether we're talking about women's cycles or hormones, we're talking about perimenopause or menopause, and then aging and skin health. So let's dive into each of these a little bit more. So many women struggle with vitamin D deficiency. They either struggle with consuming enough vitamin D or they struggle with the absorption of vitamin D. And we need vitamin D. So we may know that vitamin D is necessary for bone health, but there's some other things you may or may not know about vitamin D. So vitamin D inhibits tumor growth. It helps regulate our blood pressure, plays a major role in our cardiovascular health. It positively impacts the nervous system and brain functioning related to mental health and mood. It stimulates insulin secretion and it supports glucose metabolism. And this is really just the beginning. So what happens if we are vitamin D deficient? Well, one of the things that happens is that our calcium absorption can be jeopardized because vitamin D and calcium work together. Another thing is we can see an increase in a long list of risks: the risk of osteoporosis, risk of cancer, particularly breast and lung cancer, risk of cardiovascular disease, higher risk of depression. We can see an increased risk of type 2 diabetes. And we can also experience an inhibition of the management of our autoimmune disease. So it can be harder for us to manage and function well with an autoimmune disease when our vitamin D is low. So enter mushrooms. A single serving, about a half a cup of mushrooms, can provide about 50% of the daily recommended value of vitamin D. A single serving, half the vitamin D in a day. And we do have to remember that this is only going to relate to mushrooms that have grown outside, so they've been exposed to sunlight, or mushrooms that have been, or mushrooms that we've taken outside and exposed to sunlight. And so wild mushrooms are naturally high in vitamin D, but a lot of cultivated mushrooms are grown in dark places. So a lot of times if you're ordering fresh mushrooms, you can just ask the person who's growing them. If you are ordering an extract powder or something like that, you may be able to do some research and find out. But one really cool trick is that you can go to the store and you can buy mushrooms, whether you buy shiitake or you buy button mushrooms, whatever you want, whatever you get, you can bring them home. You can put them outside under the sun, and that will allow you to receive these vitamin D benefits. And so you don't have to leave them out there for hours. You can leave them out there for just a few minutes while you're getting things ready in the kitchen and chopping up other vegetables. Any amount of time is going to deliver some vitamin D to you. So that's great. I also like to point out that research has shown that cooked mushrooms and mushroom extracts, they contain about the same amount of vitamin D. And so this is just to say that for the vitamin D benefit of medicinal mushrooms, you don't have to go out and buy an expensive extract or expensive extract powder. Just buying mushrooms from the grocery store or a farmer's market and bringing them home and cooking them up in your kitchen will supply you with this vitamin D benefit. So this is often one of the most challenging decisions to make when working with medicinal mushrooms is which mushroom should I choose? And so we're going to look at a few different medicinal mushrooms, and we're going to look at some of their applications and uses, some of their compounds and actions, and you'll see some overlap. And so that will help you kind of narrow down some of the mushrooms that you might want to consider working with, depending on what challenge or health condition or goal you have. And then we'll also talk about some nuances in between them that may help you narrow that list of 4 or 3 down to 2 or 1. So let's start with reishi. Reishi is known as the spirit mushroom or the mushroom of the spirit. It's an immune stimulant, and you'll see that over and over again. They're all going to be supportive of the immune system. Reishi is an adaptogen. It's an antioxidant. A lot of people work with reishi spiritually or for their emotional health. Reishi really shines when it comes to sleep and insomnia. Studies that looked at reishi found that taking reishi shortened the amount of time it took to fall asleep. It prolonged sleep time. It increased the levels of 5-HT, a sleep promoting hormone, and it reduced LPS levels, which is a stimulant that can cause brain inflammation. So reishi is often a go-to mushroom when we're looking for something to help us with sleep or insomnia. But reishi has also been shown to be effective with people who have Alzheimer's disease or are struggling with cognition. In a 2016 study, participants who were struggling with Alzheimer's who took reishi saw improved cognition and problem-solving abilities. Plus, the study was able to measure a decrease in the rate of brain cell degeneration and an increase in FGFR signaling, which contributes to the body's ability to regenerate tissues and heal from wounds. And so when we talk about brain health and cognition, memory, reishi is often a go-to. And when it comes to cancer in a clinical practice, reishi is often the go-to mushroom for breast, liver, lung, and prostate cancers. So some of the other things you'll see on this list, we see that it's antiviral. People work with it in relation to HPV, autoimmune conditions, fibromyalgia. And then when we look at kind of the spiritual support of reishi, a lot of people incorporate reishi into meditation practice, ancestral connection and ancestral energy, lucid dreaming, and just dream work in general. Reishi is definitely a powerful dream work ally. So next we have lion's mane. Sometimes lion's mane is called the smart shroom. I also like to call it the shaggy shroom because it's just fun and it looks shaggy. Lion's mane really shines when we're talking about brain functioning and healthy aging, but it has a lot of applications. Brain health, and part of that is neurogenesis, which is really interesting because there's a lot of mushrooms that have neuroprotective qualities, or they support brain functioning in some way or another. but they don't all contribute to neurogenesis. So neurogenesis is the growth of brand new neurons in the brain. And there's not many things that we have access to that do that. So it's a pretty amazing superpower of lion's mane. Lion's mane has antidepressant and anti-anxiety properties. It helps with memory. It fights against H. pylori, helps with bone density and arthritis, helps with the prevention of GI cancer. And in women who are experiencing depression and anxiety in conjunction with menopause, there have been studies that have shown a significant reduction in those experiences of depression and anxiety in only 4 weeks. So the Hericianones, which let's look at the botanical name here of lion's mane. We have Hericium erinaceus. So that is descriptive of the compounds that are in the mushroom. So the Hericianones are triterpenes that are derived from the fruiting body, and they mimic nerve growth hormones. So in this picture, you're seeing the fruiting body. It's the part of the mushroom that you can see growing on this tree. But the erinacines are diterpenes, and they are derived from the mycelium, and they're neuroprotective and neurogenerative. So both of these compounds, the hericianones and the erinacines, are mostly alcohol soluble. So that would suggest that a dual extract would likely exhibit more neurological and brain benefits than a powder because of the alcohol solubility. The powder would be a good go-to for digestive support and immune support, but this information would suggest that a double extract would be best for these neuroprotective and neurogenic properties. However, just going to throw this out there, much of the research that has confirmed the neurological effects were done with the powder, not the extract. So I think there's still a lot to learn about the compounds in lion's mane beyond the two that we've been studying the most. There may be others at work here. An example of a study that I could refer to, there was a 2009 lion's mane study on cognition. There was a group of folks, 50 to 80, who were struggling with some mild cognitive impairment. They were given 3 grams of lion's mane extract powder a day for 2 months. And the effects were pretty amazing. Week after week, their cognitive abilities and their problem-solving skills improved week after week after week for these 2 months. However, something to note is that those effects and those improvements actually tapered off after the dosing stopped, suggesting that continued dosing may be important with lion's mane. So it may be one of those mushrooms that we need to continue taking to continuing to see the benefits. Cordyceps, the zombie fungus. So cordyceps is quite a unique mushroom, and I think what I'll do is just send you off on a search on your own for why it's called the zombie fungus. So you might already know, and if you do, we're on the same page. But if you don't know why cordyceps is considered the zombie fungus, then just go look up cordyceps and zombie fungus, and you'll find some information that will blow your mind and maybe freak you out a little bit. But when it comes to humans, cordyceps seems to be a really good partner. And so cordyceps can help with energy, memory, and hormonal support. In some of my other classes, I go deeper into these actions. But one thing I want to highlight for this class is that cordyceps can help regulate hormones that are essential for stabilizing mood and emotion, as well as the functions of the female reproductive system. So that makes it kind of definitely a relevant mushroom for when we're talking about women's health. So chronic fatigue and adrenal fatigue, that's a common thing that I hear from women that they're struggling with. And decreased libido is sometimes a concern. Renal failure is a more acute specific condition, but cordyceps has been known to help with that. Hepatitis B, heart disease, and autoimmune conditions. Let's look at turkey tail. Turkey tail is immune boosting, it's anti-cancerous, it has lots of applications, but I want to highlight that it has a profound impact on the immune system. It inhibits the growth of cancer cells, and it can be very powerful in helping the body handle chemotherapy. In modern medicine, there have been over 400 published cancer-related studies that involved turkey tail. Two of the world's leading cancer drugs, PSP and PSK, include extracts of turkey tail. And I do want to note here that most of these clinical trials and studies have been using the mycelium extract. There's a pretty famous study, the 2012 breast cancer study. And in this study, patients with breast cancer who were given turkey tail along with chemotherapy. And the patients who were taking the turkey tail along with chemotherapy had significantly higher 5-year survival rates and fewer side effects from chemo compared to those who were only receiving the chemo. And the study actually used host defenses turkey tail. So I would also take this moment to point you to the story of Patty Stamets, who's Paul Stamets' mother. So Paul Stamets is the founder of the Host Defense Company. And Patty Stamets was 83 years old, and she was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. And doctors gave her 3 months to live. However, after a year of taking turkey tail, meaning she lived longer than 3 months because she was able to take turkey tail for a year, she had no detectable cancer, and she lived 10 more years to the age of 93. So that's a great tangent. If you want, you can Google or search on YouTube for Paul telling that story. And it's really a personally powerful testament to the amazing medicine of turkey tail. And it's very inspirational and encouraging to hear him tell that story. So when I was talking about over 400 studies that have been done with cancer and turkey tail, here are some of the most common cancers that have been looked at in relation to how turkey tail can help. We've got colon cancer, skin cancer, lung cancer, cervical, ovarian, and breast cancer, stomach cancer, pancreatic cancer, and lymphoma. So now let's look at chaga. So again, like the rest, chaga is an immune stimulant, also anti-cancerous, it's a super antioxidant. It has the highest antioxidant activity of any natural food. It contains acetylcholine, glutathione, and SOD. So acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter that impacts memory, learning, muscle movement. Glutathione is involved in a lot of functions of the body, but tissue repair, immune system function are two examples. And superoxide dismutase, SOD, is an enzyme that helps defend the body against oxidative stress. So some unique compounds in chaga. And chaga has been worked with specifically in situations of brain cancer. The anti-cancerous compounds in chaga cross the blood-brain barrier. Chaga's worked with when we see inflammatory conditions, fatigue, and endometriosis, memory learning. And I would say here that chaga is one of the more, kind of like if there was a scale of the immunomodulating properties of medicinal mushrooms, chaga would be one of the one of the more powerful immunomodulators. And so that would be a reason why a lot of times in the situation of cancer, chaga and turkey tail are go-tos, either one or the other or both together. But there's also a mycological risk that I like to talk about anytime I share information about chaga. So chaga mostly grows on birch trees. You can occasionally find chaga on ash or elm or beech or alder, I think. But really, chaga is mostly growing on birch trees. And there are being entire birch tree forests cut down to get the chaga off the trees. And so this is a devastating impact of the medicinal mushroom trend. Chaga chocolate has just become a thing. So chaga pairs really well with chocolate. It tastes good together. So you see a lot of chocolate bars and chaga hot chocolates and all of these kinds of things, chaga coffees. And for a day-to-day use, I think that there are plenty of other medicinal mushrooms that don't pose the same ecological risk as the overharvesting of chaga that we could work with to get what we're looking for from on a day-to-day basis. If we want, to have mushroom in our coffee or our smoothies or our hot chocolate, um, if we want to bake with it, things like that, then there are other mushrooms that we could more easily and safely utilize for those reasons. And we would still be getting the day-to-day health benefits that we're looking for. I would recommend saving chaga for extreme situations. Severe compromisation. Maybe you've got something that's really demanding on the immune system, like cancer, but you have a compromised immune system. Maybe you're dealing with something like endometriosis, like these kind of more specific, intense situations. I think I would recommend going to a different medicinal mushroom for like beta glucan support, immune system support, fiber, those types of things. Now, with that said, it's really hard to find a anything that has more than one mushroom in it on the market that doesn't include chaga. If you find a medicinal mushroom blend, it almost always has chaga in it. Mushroom coffee almost always has chaga in it. So it's hard if you're buying a product that has more than one mushroom involved that it's not going to include chaga. So one thing that you can do about that is you can make your own mushroom powders. And so, for instance, if after learning about medicinal mushrooms, you decide, okay, based on the benefits I'm hearing about and things going on in my own life and my own health, I would like to work with reishi, lion's mane, and shiitake. Well, great. You can order some reishi extract powder, lion's mane extract powder, and some shiitake powder, and you can mix them all up together. And now you have made your own medicinal mushroom blend and you haven't used chaga. So just like to make people aware of this issue, there's going to be some times when you either need chaga or you're not going to have a choice because it's already in the blend or the mix or the formula that you're going to be working with. So maitake is known as hen of the woods, not to be confused with chicken of the woods. Those are different mushrooms. And maitake really shines when it comes to women's reproductive health. Of course, it's immune system supporter, as the other ones are. But we often see maitake in a clinical setting. We apply maitake to situations such as ovulation support, polycystic ovary syndrome, certain types of cancers, colon, skin, gastric, and breast to be specific. A lot of times women who are experiencing hot flashes and night sweats will see a decrease in those when they work with maitake during menopause. Supports metabolism and cardiovascular support, and it also has a unique impact on the brain and supporting cognition because of its ergothioneine content. So sometimes these words, they can trip me up. But yeah, maitake has some unique qualities that a lot of times we may not think about or expect from maitake because it is a mushroom that you can find in grocery stores that have a good mushroom selection. So you're probably not going to find reishi in a grocery store, for instance. Probably not going to find turkey tail in a grocery store. Probably not going to find cordyceps in a grocery store. But lion's mane, maitake, shiitake, and the more common mushrooms that are coming up on the next slide, like you could find those in some grocery stores. So yeah, let's talk about button mushrooms, crimini, and portobello, and let's just make sure everybody knows these are the same mushroom. They're just different size, different age of the fruiting body. So you've got the little buttons, you've got the mid-sized crimini, and you've got the adult portobellos. So they're all the same mushroom. So I don't want to overlook them, and just because they're super common and easy to get your hands on doesn't mean that they're not helpful and medicinal. They have similar immune system support to all of these other medicinal mushrooms that I've been talking about. They have beta glucans to offer, and uniquely to them, they inhibit the proliferation of breast cancer cells. So maybe an unexpected benefit and gift from such a common mushroom. Some people are a little less familiar with tremella. Tremella is known as the beauty mushroom because it supports healthy skin. It's moisturizing, it's cooling. It's said to restore the yin. It offers some cancer protection and prevention. And yet, it's really talked about when we're looking at skin support. And so whether that's just healthy skin, moisturized skin, or it's maybe the prevention of skin cancer, tremella can be uh, definitely an ally. And tremella has a lot of other medicinal properties too, but I think that for the sake of this class, this is kind of where I want to stay with tremella. And then we have wood ear. So wood ear has lots of nicknames and common names. Jelly ear is one, and it's known as jelly ear because it's got a jelly-like texture and it looks like a bunch of little ears. It's really fun to find in the wild. It's cooling. It's supportive of the reproduction system. One of the ways it is supportive in that way is it can regulate menstrual flow. It can help slow the aging process. It offers some cardiovascular support and it helps with healthy metabolism. So let's look at pairing women's health concerns and conditions with specific medicinal mushrooms. So you may have been thinking, well, okay, a bunch of those were supportive of the cardiovascular system. A lot of those were anti-cancerous, like they all support the immune system. So how in the world am I going to narrow this down? So maybe the next few slides will be helpful. So when we're looking at heart disease, all medicinal mushrooms have a positive impact on the cardiovascular system, which means they're going to help reduce the risk of heart disease. But if we're looking for some what I call superstars here, cordyceps, reishi, shiitake, and wood ear are ones that I might choose to work with for different reasons. And so just adding medicinal mushrooms to your life is going to help your cardiovascular system and hopefully reduce the risk of heart disease. But if perhaps heart disease runs in your family or there's already some concerns, or there's already some cardiovascular condition present, then we would discuss that and kind of dive into the situation a little bit deeper. And then cordyceps or reishi, shiitake or wood ear, or a blend of these may be where we would go. When we're talking about breast cancer specifically, turkey tail, reishi, maitake, and chaga are easy to choose allies. And when we're looking at mental health, reishi, lion's mane, and mushrooms with psilocybin would be the three that I would most quickly go to. We're going to talk a little bit more about psilocybin mushrooms later, but I do want to point out that many medicinal mushrooms are adaptogens. So again, they're going to support the nervous system and a healthy stress response, which is going to have a positive impact on mental health. So reishi, lion's mane, cordyceps, turkey tail, shiitake, maitake, wood ear, even tremella. There's so most of the medicinal mushrooms have adaptogenic properties. So most of them are going to support mental health, even if it's just in a subtle way. So let's look at some of those other women's health topics that I brought up earlier. Fatigue and low energy, reishi, cordyceps, lion's mane, chaga. So this is a great example of when it's really hard to do a this for that. Like, I have low energy. Is there a mushroom for that? Or I have adrenal fatigue. Is there a mushroom for that? We see that with herbal medicine a lot too. It's like, have you got an herb for this? Or like, what's an herb for that? And it's so much more complex than that. We need story, we need background, we need additional information before we really know what's going to be a good place to start. And so this is a great illustration of that. Why are you experiencing fatigue? Why is your energy low? And if you don't know, well, then there's some questions, there's some conversations we need to have, there's some things to look at. And based on our discovery together, we may choose reishi or cordyceps or lion's mane or chaga or a blend of them. We may bring in herbs to support you as well. So It's not as simple as it is for that, just as it's not as simple as it is for that when we're working with herbs. Sleep, reishi is typically my go-to. Lion's mane can also be very supportive. Cancer prevention and recovery from a general standpoint, turkey tail reishi, chaga, and maitake. But once again, we definitely want to have, if you were actually, facing a cancer diagnosis, you were in recovery, or a specific type of cancer ran in your family and you were concerned about it, then we would definitely do some narrowing down to determine which of these or what combination of these would be the best. And we may bring a completely different mushroom into the mix as well. Hormone support and menopause. Reishi, cordyceps, lion's mane, these are common go-tos. Cordyceps is often what I would reach for, but I want to highlight a few things about reishi here. So there are terpenes in reishi that can increase the production of estrogen and progesterone, and this can increase increase the sensitivity of cell receptors related to hormonal stimuli. Also, there's a compound in reishi that increases blood flow, reduces insomnia, fatigue, and stress. Plus, it strengthens the action between noradrenaline and dopamine for an antidepressive effect. And so, this can be very helpful when we're dealing with hormonal imbalance or struggling with the symptoms of menopause. Something to note about each of these is that these specific compounds in reishi are water soluble at 77 degrees. So we don't need a double extract. We can have a broth, or we can have an extract powder, a tea, and we can get these compounds from reishi. We can also have a dual extract, and that's okay, but we don't have to have a dual extract. Let's talk a little bit about medicinal protocols. So this is a very, very, very general slide. And it just kind of gives you an idea of where ranges could be. If you are looking for a protocol for general health, so just general health and wellness, you'd like to bring some medicinal mushrooms into your daily life, and maybe you're curious about what a good dosage range would be, then we're looking at 1 to 3 grams a day. That's pretty low from a traditional Chinese medicine standpoint, where sometimes people are consuming 10 to 12 grams a day. That's a lot compared to the norm in our culture. But when you start looking at extract powders, you will find that quality extract powders are often very expensive. So you may decide that when you do the math, 3 grams of extract powder a day is not in the budget. So it's going to be 1 gram. And 1 gram is enough to make a difference. And I just want to remind you, even though the slide says it, I'm talking about extract powder. So this is not fresh mushroom weight. This is extract powder. So 1 to 3 grams a day of 1 to 3 grams a day of extract powder. Now, when we start looking at recovery protocols, therapeutic protocols, we're going to be definitely over 3 grams a day, probably over 6 grams a day. Some protocols are double that. And so, it can be really hard to find the right dose on your own. So I recommend if you're looking at therapeutic or clinical applications, it can be really helpful to have, even if it's just one consultation, a 1-hour consultation with an herbalist who works with medicinal mushrooms regularly, or a mycotherapist. That can really make a really big difference. It can save you time and money and increase the chances of it being effective. When we're thinking about medicinal mushroom protocols, we also want to think about, or some considerations we want to think about, is fruiting body versus mycelium. So like I said, there's some compounds that are only in fruiting body, some that are only in mycelium, some that are in both. So it can be helpful to know what compound we're looking for if it's a specific one. And then it can also be good to know whether an extract powder is a better formula to go with, or the dual extract tincture is better to go with, based on the solubility of the compound or compounds we're looking for. So these are reasons why additional research or working with a practitioner might be needed. So I can't have a discussion about women's health without touching on women's spirituality. In my work, spiritual wellness is one of the eight dimensions of health. Our culture may not always include it in a conversation about health and wellness, but when I'm working with someone, I'm just as concerned with someone's spiritual wellness and that deeper, mystical, sacred part of the self as I am with anything else. And some of the mushrooms we've talked about so far, especially reishi, can be really powerful allies for spiritual work. I find that women especially connect with reishi, and when we work with reishi, intentionally, mindfully, you could say ceremonially, reishi can feel like a comforting motherly presence. It can be a really powerful experience. So I'd like to share a bit about that. And just from a general standpoint, I'll say that, people have worked with mushrooms spiritually and religiously for centuries. We have cave carvings and painting that date back 12,000 of years, depicting the special connection between humans and mushrooms. Oftentimes in those situations, it seems to be the psychoactive and psychedelic variety. We have evidence of, the Mayan ruins with psychedelic mushrooms and Siberian ceremonies with Amanita muscaria. We know that indigenous peoples in North America and northern South America worked with a very specific white polypore in sacred ways, both in burning rituals and keeping pieces of them in their medicine pouches for spiritual purposes, protective reasons, and also the medicinal properties of that specific mushroom. Mushrooms in general have been viewed by many cultures and people as messengers from the underworld, spiritual guides, and allies to help prepare for death. Smoking them, drinking them, burning them, working with them in so many different ways, both psychoactive mushrooms and not, have a really long history and herstory. We know about some of the rituals and some shamanic journeys that were guided by medicine women of various cultures that included mushrooms. And specifically, I'll note Maria Sabina here, who we honor as the woman who shared psilocybin mushroom medicine with the West and honestly paid a pretty devastating price for that generosity. So I like to talk a lot more about her in the classes that focus on psychoactive and psychedelic mushrooms, but I at least want to share her name. And if you have never heard of her or don't know her story, I would really encourage you to look it up. So, as I move into this conversation about mushrooms and women's spiritual health, I want to share options that are accessible to everyone. So, even though I work closely with psychoactive mushrooms and a significant part of my private practice involves supporting people in the psychedelic space, I want to focus a bit more on mushroom spirit medicine and working with mushrooms energetically as a way of interacting with them that can support the spirit and soul. When we engage with them in this way, it's not so much about the compounds as it is about relationship and connection and communication. So there's a lot of ways that we could define mushroom spirit medicine. And honestly, I use the term differently myself, depending on the context of a conversation I'm in and the people that I'm talking to. In the same way that plant spirit medicine can be defined in lots of different ways as well. For the purpose of today's conversation, I'm saying mushroom spirit medicine to mean connecting with the spirit of a mushroom. And in the place of spirit, you can say essence, you can say energy, you could even say personality. So we're connecting with the essence of a mushroom, the energy of a mushroom, the personality of a mushroom. We could also say that we're working with a mushroom with spiritual intentions. Mushroom spirit medicine does not require, in this context, the ingestion of anything. It doesn't require the ingestion of any mushroom at all. And so some possible things you could experience working with connecting to the energy of a mushroom or the essence of a mushroom is a sense of companionship or belonging. You could have mystical experiences. You could experience a deep connection with self or nature. You could have visions or spontaneous ideas that turned out to be really helpful or relevant to your life. You could receive messages from ancestors or kind of the other world or the realm of spirit. You may feel a deep sense of comfort and nourishment or gratitude and wonder. And I think that also a common experience is an increased capacity for healing. And what I mean by that is not only do we have more, maybe stamina or perseverance for the healing journey, but we may feel as though we now have additional support or companionship or moral support along that journey from this beautiful, wise being that is accompanying us now. So when you look at this list of things, you might be thinking, if you know much about psychedelic mushrooms and psychoactive mushrooms, you may be thinking, wait a minute, are you sure you're talking about not consuming a mushroom? You're telling me I can have all of those experiences without consuming anything? And what I will say is, yes, you can, because I have had all of these experiences working with mushrooms in instances in which I did not consume the mushroom at all. You may not have a full-blown psychedelic journey experience, but you can have profound experiences, not so subtle experiences, and you can have very subtle experiences to where you really are having to listen deeply and pay attention and be really present, or you'll miss what's going on. But I just want you to know, yes, it's possible. It's possible to have all of these experiences working with the essence or the energy of a mushroom without ever consuming it. So, mushroom spirit medicine practices and rituals. Here's a few different ways that you might work with mushrooms in this way. And you could work with any mushroom in this way as long as, any mushroom in this way, right? Because we're not even going to be consuming it in most situations. So one is just sacred time spent. You could literally just spend some time with a mushroom. It may be a mushroom that you find in nature. It may be a mushroom that you grow. It could even be a mushroom that you pick up at a farmer's market or at a store. But just, you may feel like this little draw or push or nudge or this kind of whisper-like experience of like just feeling like something is suggesting that you spend a little bit of time with this mushroom. So there's no need to try to explain that or understand it or analyze it. I recommend just accepting the invitation and just spending a little time, seeing what unfolds, seeing what comes up, and just having a sense of curiosity and open-mindedness. In situations like that, you may find that it's an opportunity for intimate connection and intuitive listening. So when you think about intimately connecting with another person, you might find yourself talking to the mushroom or sharing part of your story. You may suddenly feel as though that mushroom is witnessing you, and you may need a witness for something. You may need a witness for your tears, or you may need a witness for your anger, or there's lots of different things that just may kind of fall out of that experience unexpectedly. And intuitive listening, like there's the give and take of a mushroom spirit experience. So there's, your contribution to that relationship and conversation, and then there's the listening and the being with and seeing what that mushroom might be wanting to share with you. We can have meditative journeys with mushrooms, and so one way to do that without consuming a mushroom is to simply have that mushroom with you in your meditation space, and communicate and state your intentions to the mushroom. I'm bringing you into my meditation space. I'm interested to know if you can help me connect more deeply to myself, or if maybe you have a message for me. And if dream work, great. Mushrooms are great for dream work. There's some specific mushrooms that kind of are famous for being dream work allies. But all mushrooms kind of have this mystical quality about them, and they seem to have their foot in that dream, or I guess their mycelium in that dream world. And so working with mushrooms, pairing mushrooms with dream work can be a really special experience. And then we're kind of talking about quantum dosing. And quantum dosing is when the dose is an energetic dose. It's a quantum dose. So we're not talking about microdosing. We're not talking about small amounts, consuming small amounts. We're not talking about ceremonial or high doses where we're taking large amounts of anything. We're literally talking about an energetic dose. But you could do microdosing. You could have a sacramental ceremony where you're consuming a high dose for spiritual purposes. And those can be mushroom spirit practices too. I just really want to emphasize that there's all these ways to work with mushrooms spiritually that don't include microdosing or what we would say maybe is macro dosing. And then finally, another practice I'll add on here is offerings of gratitude. And that can be offerings of gratitude, thanking a mushroom for something it's doing in another domain of your health. So maybe you've started taking lion's mane for cognitive benefits and you're seeing cognitive benefits. Well, a mushroom spirit practice could be finding a way to offer gratitude and thankfulness to lion's mane for helping you. And so that in itself could be a spirit practice, and it make you feel closer to the mushroom, and also it really shifts even the way you look at your own health and healing, and it becomes more of a living process than kind of a supplement routine. The spirit to spirit connection with any mushroom. Yep, you can become friends, you can befriend any mushroom. And I really do look at mushrooms as my friends. Like mushrooms have played a huge role in just my life, but my healing and all different kinds of mushrooms and all different kinds of ways of working with them. I really do consider them to be my soulful companions as I'm walking along this walking along this path, this human path. And so, if you want to befriend a mushroom, then here are some suggestions. And these suggestions are based on how you might build a friendship with anything, another human, a plant, anything. So first of all, consider introducing yourself. I'm not kidding. You have a mushroom, you want to just kind of experiment with this process. And so, yeah, just introduce yourself, just like you would introduce yourself to a new person that you want to build a friendship with. Dedicate some time and attention to the conversation. Consider sharing a part of your story. It may seem odd the first few times you're talking out loud to a mushroom and that mushroom is not talking out loud in your language back to you, but it gets less weird as time goes on. And then listen. That is probably the most important. And we're listening with more than our ears, and we're listening for more than words. We're listening with all of our senses, and we're listening for the many different types of ways mushrooms can communicate with us. So they can communicate. We may suddenly just have a memory pop into our mind that we haven't thought about in 15 years. And it just makes no sense that it would be there all of a sudden. And if we work with that memory and we get curious about that memory, we may realize that it's not a coincidence that that occurred during our time with this mushroom that we've asked to bring us a message or accompany our healing. And mushrooms also talk in symbols and sounds. You may hear a sound that you know is not happening around your body. You may see symbols or colors, or you may just have a sensation in your body that seems to be telling you something. If it wasn't the fact that you were involved in this conversation with this mushroom, like that wouldn't just spontaneously happened. And so we want to honor their time. Same way we would honor a person's time. And we want to surrender. And by surrender, I mean we want to be curious and trusting. We don't want to demand explanations and second guess everything we sense or hear or feel. Like we want to develop a trusting relationship with them. And then we want to show gratitude. And so we can show gratitude through offerings, through reciprocal acts, such as acts of kindness that are just anonymous acts of kindness in honor of or dedicated to the mushroom. We can help take care of the environments that they grow in. We can do other types of things like kind of out of the box things, like we can write them a letter of gratitude. We can sing them a song. There's lots of things we can offer to them as a thank you. So kind of back to the dosing really quick here. The quantum dose is the energetic dose. We're mostly talking about presence, and that is the exchange. Your energy, their energy, that is an energetic dose. Some people will consume an essence, some similar to a flower essence, or they will take, say if you have a microdose tincture and your microdose is 30 drops or 60 drops, then someone might take 1 drop, just this super, super, super tiny, even version of a microdose for that intimate connection that may feel like it helps them connect better. But when we're talking about the quantum dose, we're not looking for any of the psychoactive properties. And the dose, if we were to consume anything, would be so tiny that those compounds wouldn't even be traceable. When we move into microdosing and ceremonial doses, for the most part, I am talking about psychoactive mushrooms here. We wouldn't really be talking about microdosing lion's mane or, kind of getting in the weeds about dosage ranges of cordyceps. If you're wanting to form a relationship with cordyceps and you want a spiritual relationship with cordyceps, like I recommend just spending some time with cordyceps. I don't recommend figuring out this perfect dosage for spiritual work with cordyceps. But at the same time, you may feel called to do that, or cordyceps may share some instructions with you. And if so, by all means, they're smarter than I am. So I'd follow their lead. But back to psychoactive mushrooms and psychedelic mushrooms, a microdose is a sub-psychoactive amount. So we choose a microdose. We want the subtle effects of the compound that's in the mushroom. We want to ingest the mushroom as a form of intimacy without a high dose. So a sub-psychoactive amount. That means that you may perceive something, like you may feel more focused. You may feel more grounded. You may just feel different, but you can't put your finger on it. But if you start to have like shifts in your sensory experiences, or you feel extremely distracted, or you start to have some experiences of altered states of consciousness, definitely anything that you might start explaining or describing as psychedelic to somebody, you're out of the microdose range. You shouldn't feel any of that in a microdose. So anything above your microdose is a macro dose. And I have ceremonial dose on here because I'm speaking in spiritual health and spiritual practice right now. But microdose, small. Macrodose, big. And so anything that's larger than your microdose is a macrodose. And there are many different the range is huge. Depending on the mushroom you're talking about, we could be talking about just minor psychedelic effects, like subtle, but they're there. Or we could be talking about a really high dose experience where you need a support person with you. We just start talking about safety and setting and all of these different things that would go along with the psychedelic journey. So I want to share a couple practices in mushroom spirit medicine that I enjoy, and they might be something that you want to try. So I work with reishi as a spiritual companion and teacher, and one of the ways that I work with reishi is with the tea ritual. So if you want to work with reishi in this way, you will be consuming reishi when this particular practice. And so you want to set aside some time for the ritual. You want to, maybe put some boundaries up if there's other people in your house or around you. You want to minimize distractions. And you want to know what your intentions are. Is there a specific request or reason that you're going to be having this tea ritual, or is it more of just you want to open yourself up to whatever reishi you might want to share with you or show you? We want to prepare your space. That could be something simple as tidying up your room, or, just putting some clutter away or something like that, opening some windows or closing windows for that matter. Or it could be something that you want, even preparing your space to be a ritual. So you may do some sort of space clearing or blessing practice before starting your experience with reishi. And then you want to prepare yourself. And this could be simple or as complex as you want it to be as well. It may be that you just want to do a little breath work, and maybe you want to stretch a little bit, or maybe light a candle, Or it may be that you want to take a shower and kind of rinse the day off and have kind of this um, more of a blank slate or an openness to yourself before starting this ritual with reishi. So you're going to brew a strong cup of reishi tea. I usually take about an inch or so of dried reishi strips, and I will let that steep for about 45 minutes. That makes a pretty strong cup of reishi tea. You could definitely steep it for longer than that if you have time. And then what I like to do is I like to actually talk to the reishi. I share something. I express my intentions, or I just thank reishi for being with me, and then I surrender. I try to listen, and I just try to savor the experience and the time together. And through all of that, I might be receiving something, I might not be. I might be reflecting on something, I might not be. I may be journaling, or I may just be sitting in mindful presence. And as you know, I will let this extend over, 30, 45 minutes to an hour of time. Be from the time that the tea is ready and I start sipping it and spending time with reishi, that from the tea might simmer for 45 minutes, and then I may be with that in that ritual for like 45 minutes to an hour in addition to the brew time. But it's totally flexible, however you want to do it. You can experiment and just do what feels good to you. And then, of course, as part of this ritual, I would want to show gratitude to the reishi, and I would want to find a way to respectfully return the reishi to the earth. So instead of just tossing reishi in the garbage, I would take reishi outside, or, you know, find a way to maybe even composting. Like compost could be a respectful way to return reishi to the earth. But I try not to just treat it like, well, I'm done with you and just toss it in the garbage. I try to even make what I do with reishi after my ritual intentional. So dream work rituals. There's different ways that you could work with reishi and dreams. I have the small reishi that I found in recently, and I sleep with this reishi. I keep it by my pillow during sleep, and I will tell you that my dream life since I started doing that is immeasurably different than my dream life before I started doing that. It's quite significant. What I usually do before when I lay down for bed at night, I have all the lights already turned off and the device put away and all that. I will put this reishi on my forehead for 5 or 10 minutes. Just do a little breath work. Just kind of come into presence with reishi. Sometimes I'll share something or ask something, or make a request or something, and most of the time not. Most of the time I just open myself up and try to be present. And what's really interesting is that oftentimes things will start happening before I even fall asleep. Visuals will start coming, almost like a light journey experience will start happening. I've had what seems very much like a very vivid dreams already start before I even start slipping into that liminal space of falling asleep and then being asleep. And so that's an example of working with reishi where I didn't consume any reishi at all. I put reishi on my forehead, but like I didn't drink any reishi tea. I didn't add reishi powder to anything. But you could drink reishi tea before bed. You could burn dried reishi as you might burn a specific herb or an incense in a ritual. You could ask the spirit or essence of reishi to communicate with you through your dreams, or just to help you remember your dreams. And you can do that without reishi being present. Like you don't have to have an actual piece of reishi. You can just call out in your mind and invite the spirit or the essence of reishi to come be with you and be in your space. And some people who are who like to do dream work, they have a dream work altar. And so if you have a dream altar, then another thing that you could do is you could put reishi on your dream altar. So we've knocked on this door a little bit so far. We've talked a little bit about psychoactive mushrooms, and I don't think that it makes sense to have a conversation about medicinal mushrooms these days without at least touching on this topic. So, what I do want to say is that we are barely dipping our toes into this topic. And while I do spend a lot of my time in my private practice supporting people who are working with psychoactive and psychedelic mushrooms, um, there's not enough time in this class to really dive into any of that. But if you are completely new to the topic, there are a few things I'd like to just share with you. And maybe those things will give you enough information to help you do some research on your own, go down some fun rabbit holes and learn more, or be able to engage in some really good conversations about this topic after the class. So when we talk about psychoactive mushrooms, there are many mushrooms we could talk about actually, because psychoactive simply means that something impacts how the brain functions. And so lion's mane impacts how the brain functions. So we could even throw lion's mane in the mix of psychoactive. But for the purpose of this section of the presentation, we're going to be talking about two different mushrooms. We're going to be talking about mushrooms that contain psilocybin, and we're going to be talking about Amanita muscaria, which contains mucimol and obetinic acid. So, Amanita muscaria is a psychoactive mushroom. Mushrooms with psilocybin are psychoactive mushrooms that are also psychedelic. And so I'm going to hold the explanation of that to the next slide. But just know that these mushrooms are very different. Just because they're both psychoactive does not mean that they are closely related, that their dosages are the same, or that they provide the same experiences. So just keep that in mind. So psilocybin mushrooms are often referred to as magic mushrooms. There have been, in the last 20 years, a resurgence in clinical studies and public interest in psilocybin mushrooms. They are still federally regulated. They're classified as a Schedule 1 drug. So at the federal level, psilocybin and psilocybin-containing mushrooms are illegal. There are decriminalization efforts. There's several states that have decriminalized them, where it's much safer to work with them. There's even some states that have therapeutic programs that you can go to, and you can find, psilocybin assisted therapy and recovery programs. And psilocybin has a multitude of promising effects. Doesn't work for everybody, but this is a very short list of applications here. So one of the most impressive, I think, capabilities of psilocybin mushrooms is their role in neurogenesis. So like I mentioned with lion's mane, neurogenesis is the stimulation of brand new neuron growth, which very few things offer us that. And so with lion's mane, neurogenesis happens over a long period of time. With psilocybin, if we have a high dose of psilocybin, say 4 grams of dried psilocybin or more, we can see neurogenesis happening then. And we don't have to take this mushroom for weeks or months at a time. It can have an immediate impact on neurogenesis with a high dose. We see improvement in depression and anxiety with a lot of people, increased stress tolerance, a lot of promising results with people who are struggling with PTSD or addiction or co-occurring disorders working with psilocybin, eating disorders. We see intimate partners improving their relationship and their communication and their ability to support each other and be present with each other working with psilocybin mushrooms. And then, of course, psilocybin is a sacred medicine. And psilocybin has been worked with for, centuries as an ally for spiritual exploration and soul care. And I've got eco-purpose on here. And eco-purpose is kind of like your purpose beyond what your role is in your human life. So a lot of times when we work with mushrooms, we start to see where we fit into the grander scheme. Where's our place in the entire ecosystem? And we can start feeling a sense of belonging and connection to the non-human world. The living world, very much alive, but not necessarily only human. And so I think that's a unique experience with psilocybin, is this um, uncovering or discovery of or interest in what our more universal and primal purpose might be. So I'm going to zip through some of these slides. So I was talking about the difference between a psychoactive and a psychedelic. And so a psychedelic targets very specific serotonin receptors. And so those serotonin receptors are the 5-HT2A receptors. So psychedelic compounds, they target those receptors, bind to them, and they activate them. Psilocybin does that. Psilocybin targets, binds with, and activates the 5-HT2A serotonin receptors. The compounds in Amanita muscaria do not do that. They work on other things, which we'll get to. So the 5-HT2A receptors play a key role in regulating mood and anxiety. They play a role in schizophrenia. They impact our experience of consciousness and lots of other things. Working with psilocybin and having them interact with our serotonin receptors in this way, it can increase our creative thinking, can open our mind to different possibilities that we might shut down in our normal waking consciousness, and it disrupts the default mode network. So we all have this wiring in us. It is determined by a variety of things, our childhood experiences, traumatic events that we've experienced, conditioning. It can even be impacted by just what's going on that day, our expectations that we have of the world and people and circumstances. So this default mode network is kind of like our operating system. And it influences the way we just automatically respond to and interact with and assign meaning to what happens. And when our brains are under the influence of psilocybin, that default mode network is disrupted. And so suddenly we're able to consider things that maybe we would not have ever considered before. We may be able to pick up on or speculate possibilities that would have never came to our mind before. We let things play out a little longer than we might would in our waking consciousness. We experience things differently. Our senses interact with each other and other things differently. And there's just this expansive possibility and the chance for our brains to literally start to rewire themselves. And so you may have heard wired for fear or wired for connection. If we've had a lot of experiences in our life that were negative and have taught us that the world is not a safe place, then we interact with the world as though it's not a safe place. And if we have enough experiences that convinced us that the world is generally a safe place and people are generally trustworthy, then we interact with the world as though the world is a safe place and people are generally trustworthy. And so especially if our brains are wired for fear and we're constantly in this hyperactive state of being over obsessed with safety all the time, even in situations where it's totally unnecessary, we just can't help it. The disruption of the default mode network can really help heal and restructure that internal operating system. So we've already started talking about some of this and how this could relate to our mental health. It can drastically shift our perceptions around life circumstances, attachment, fear, phobias, end of life. It can help us create a new narrative. And I feel like oftentimes when people end up in, conversations with mushrooms in a high dose journey that they can retell later, like, there's often a theme of story, of letting go of a story or rewriting a story or realizing that you're trapped in a specific narrative that you have control over. And somehow it's just more profound and tangible than if a person were just to casually say that to you. It's delivered in It's delivered in a way that just makes it more real, is the best way I can put it. I've heard many people say that felt like 10 years of therapy in a day. So I'm talking about a high dose experience here, but some of the research that kind of follow people after their journeys, they've measured lasting effects for over 4 years. And the people that I've worked with who have had high dose journeys have definitely made comments like, that was 10 years of therapy all in one day. That's a common sentiment. And you may have heard that a lot of people in clinical trials report that a high dose experience with psilocybin is one of the top 3 most significant events in their life. And I will specify that these are in clinical trials where the set and setting are tended to meticulously. But when set and setting and safety and intention are all there, this is also something that I commonly hear from people that I work with. So we've already talked about dosing a little bit. Microdosing is that small sub-psychedelic dose. There's various schedules and protocols that you can look up on your own. Macrodosing is anything above the microdose. So it may be a low dose where you just have an enhanced experience, an enhanced sensual experience, maybe feel a little deeper connection, maybe you're able to connect with your meditation practice a little bit more, or it could be a high dose experience where it's more intense and there's an altered state of consciousness. There may be the experience of identity dissolution. There's lots of different things that can happen. As we start increasing the dose, we really want to start thinking about things like set and setting. So that's your mindset as well as your environment. Both of those things can impact your experience. You want to think about a trip sitter, and if you want to have somebody with you who can help make sure you're safe during your journey. And integration is really important. And integration is what you do with the experience. And so the journey itself, the dose itself is just the beginning. It's the first step of a long journey, a long conversation. And so integration is essential for seeing change and healing as a result of these experiences. So I'm saying these are, my case studies, not because they're official case studies, but they're cases that I've actually interacted. They're people that I've actually interacted with. They're cases from my practice where I've personally witnessed these things happening. So these have either been people that I've supported as a trip sitter or a guide, or they're people who I was working with as a microdosing mentor or an integration coach, or maybe all of those things. So with microdosing, I see people having an increased sense of self-awareness. They have more mindful responses to daily stress and triggers. They have the ability to self-regulate faster than prior to microdosing. They have a deepened connection with themselves and oftentimes a deeper connection with nature and the world and other living beings that are not human. Like they may have a deeper connection with their pets or a deeper connection with their plants. Increased focus and creativity, better sleep, ability to notice invitations and opportunities for self-development and healing that maybe in the past they would not have even picked up on. So these subtle synchronicities or signs or invitations from just life that our default mode network just filters out and we don't even see them. People oftentimes once they start microdosing, they're just like, I'm just noticing more of these things. Like there's more synchronicity in my life now. And it's not that there wasn't synchronicity before, it's just that we were filtering it out perhaps. And I will say that I know there's a noticeable difference in the effectiveness of microdosing when someone approaches microdosing as an intentional activity or when they approach it as a supplement routine. And so I'm not saying that it's bad to approach microdosing as a supplement routine, but if you will take the extra step and interact with that practice and with the mushroom intentionally, then oftentimes the effectiveness and the experiences are more noticeable. So that was all about microdosing. So macrodosing is when we're starting to get into these larger doses. And so these are all different things that I've personally witnessed with people who have been consuming larger dosages above the microdose range of psilocybin mushrooms. So one is a decrease in anxiety and OCD symptoms. An increase in hope and optimism after years of depression. An end of suicidal ideations after 8 years of struggle. That was a specific person. Something I call expedited inner child work. I don't know how else to put it. It's just there's these parts of ourselves that have been wounded or suppressed since childhood that oftentimes we're not even aware of. And it takes an intense experience like a psilocybin journey to bring them out of hiding and for them to be able to get our attention. And sometimes in a journey or during the integration process after the journey, those parts of ourselves we're just brought face to face with them. I've seen the end of alcohol addiction. People have had profound mystical experiences. They've had encounters with ancestors or deceased family members. They have had life-altering messages. They've had encounters with what they would consider spirit or God or Holy Mother. They've had first-time feelings of true belonging or acceptance or forgiveness. They've maybe come out with redefined boundaries or values or life goals. Maybe they want to make some major shifts in their life from what they've experienced. So it's just a, tip of the iceberg here, but these are some things that I've seen. There's a lot of words on this slide, but these are some resources that I recommend if you want to dive into this topic more. There's 2 books, The Psilocybin Mushroom Companion and The Psychedelic Explorer's Guide. Those are great. A few documentaries here. I have learned a lot personally from Christopher Hobbs, both in person and online. Paul Stamets is a great resource, podcasts and YouTube videos and books. I love Dr. Catherine McLean's work. She has a great memoir about her psychedelic journey with psilocybin mushrooms in her book, Midnight Water. And there's other things on here too. There's the Psychedelic Sciences Conference. I recommend you look into set and setting and integration, a couple of microdosing protocols there. And as I mentioned before, totally worth your time to look up the story and the contributions of Maria Sabina. So I want to wrap us up here, just quickly touch on fly agaric, Amanita muscaria. Lots of applications. A lot of these are from microdosing. I'm not going to read them all off, but I will just say that in some other areas of the world, Amanita muscaria is looked at as a general health tonic. So it's worked with in a lot of different ways for a lot of different things. Amanita muscaria has mucimol and abotinic acid as its psychoactive compounds. These do not do the same. These do not interact with their body in the same way as psilocybin. So they enhance the inhibitory effects of GABA. They suppress the central nervous system. Lots of different experiences with mucimol and abotinic acid. Dosing also can't be interchanged with psilocybin. Microdosing is a great place to start. Some people are more sensitive to Amanita, and there's a few more contraindications with drugs and medications that you may be on than with psilocybin. Psilocybin is pretty safe, very few contraindications in terms of safety. So a couple of resources with Amanita. There are 2 great books, Microdosing with Amanita muscaria and Dosing Amanita muscaria, What to Expect. And those are great. So I want to just encourage you to proceed with caution. The magic mushroom market is an entrepreneur's dream right now. There's sneaky labels, there's misleading information, there's questionable ingredients. We definitely see a lot of monetizing something that nature gives us for free. There's the concern of exploiting and commodifying sacred practices and ancient wisdom and moving something that has always been community-centered to a capitalistic environment. So because of all of that, I recommend that you don't take any chances. Consult with a practitioner, do your own research, trust your gut, be wary of marketing schemes. Look for someone who's passionate about mushrooms, not someone who's passionate about business. It's okay. I'm not against people paying for mushrooms or it being part of business, but if someone is more excited about business and the money-making opportunities of mushrooms than the mushrooms themselves, that's something that we can think about. So just a couple of takeaways. All medicinal mushrooms have immune boosting properties. You can start enjoying those properties right now by just incorporating them into your daily life. Your dosing and your formulas are going to greatly depend on your goals. So I recommend working with a practitioner if you have clinical goals or you have an acute condition. And just don't forget that mushrooms can be our friends and our spiritual allies in addition to being helpers in our physical health and recovery. Couple of book recommendations that you can come back to: Christopher Hobbs' Medicinal Mushrooms, Midnight Water, Mirrors in the Earth by Asia Schuler. And Mirrors in the Earth is not so much about mushrooms as it is about this intimate spirit connection with all things in nature. So I want to thank you for joining this class. You can contact me through our email, midsouthwomensherbalconference@gmail.com. On the web, we have our web address there, Instagram, we have a Facebook group. Upcoming events: the Chattanooga Medicinal Mushroom Summit in August, Midsouth Women's Herbal Conference in October. And I just want to thank you so much for letting me share some things about my favorite topic and these powerful ancient healers that have made such a difference in my life. And I constantly am able to witness them making big differences in other people's lives too. So I invite you to reach out. And if I don't see you at an event, I'd love to connect with you online. Thank you so much. And yeah, thank you for being here.
Hey everyone, this is Mason with HerbRally. Thanks so much for watching today's video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and also go ahead and subscribe. We come out with new herbal content each and every week. If you didn't know, HerbRally also lists Herbalism events. We list Herbalism events chronologically. We list them also by state. So you can just go ahead and search by Oregon or Wisconsin or wherever you live. You can find out what Herbalism events are happening in your neck of the woods. We also list Herbalism events, virtual herbal events. So if you can't make it to an in-person conference or plant walk, we list lots of virtual events as well. To find out more, you could go to herbrally.com/events or herbrally.com/virtual. But if you can help it, I would highly recommend trying to go to an Herbalism conference. Those are some of the best learning experiences I've ever had, and that's where you can find different herbal teachers, and then maybe you could perhaps take their apprenticeship. But yeah, just do what you can. Get out there and learn about the herbs, you know, like yarrow, dandelion, corn, you know, all the above, like all the medicinal herbs. And we'll see you out there. Hope to see you at an herb conference. All right, bye.